And we are back with the Max's Muscle TV podcast. I am your host, Scott Goble, and I'm joined once again by my good friend and co-host, Mr. Luke Schembri. Welcome, Luke.
Hey, Scotty.
And we are joined once again by a man who is smarter than us, and we're reluctant to say that. We like to think we are the intellectuals of the bodybuilding world, but every now and then we come up against a superior mind, and he has joined us here today, the beast, Aaron Cordina. Welcome, Aaron.
Thanks, boys. Thanks for having me on again. Looking forward to it.
Mate, we were very, very happy to discuss the hip hinging in a previous episode. We got a lot out of it. So we thought it would be great to have you back and talk about some other potential movements that can cause issues for a number of people. And the bench press came to mind, something that I have hurt myself on numerous times, largely through poor technique, most likely. So, Aaron, if you could run down the potential pros and cons of the bench press and the most high-risk incorrect techniques that you might see.
Yeah, sure, mate. So it's a good point. I've seen, even myself, I had an injury, I'd have to think now, probably be 10 years ago, I reckon. And there was a hint of ego lifting in it. Not that I admit it these days, too smart for that. But back then I did. I think off memory it was about the Smith machine, I think about 200 on the bar. And I punched out half a dozen reps, and I thought, I'm going to go for one more, I can feel it. And I pretty much went against the grain of everything I teach everyone. Shoulder protracted forward, back flattened out, and I hear this ripping sensation in my right arm, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, here we go. The scary thing about that was I lost all sort of muscle activation in my tricep for about 4 months. So, I'd like to think I'm quite a strong individual. So I was pretty much doing the stack on, say, like a tricep push down, very, very easy. I could barely move 5 kilos with that arm and a tricep push down for like the next 4 months. And it had nothing really to do with that movement pattern other than the fact it's a secondary movement to pressing, right? The pec being the primary one. That scared the absolute crap out of me because I thought, man, I've done some real sort of neural damage here and I don't know if it's going to get any better. So my pressing took probably a good 5 months to come good, and it took a good 3.5, 4 months for my tricep to basically come good as well, even though there was no problem with the tricep. It was more of a motor unit recruitment problem, right? So the day before I was doing the stack, pumping them out, no problems. The next day, I'd have to get my left hand to basically do a semi-supported push down to assist it to do 5 kilos. So that was a really nasty injury, and that's where I started to think about how could I prevent this, other individuals sort of preventing this from happening again. So yeah, bench press is an excellent fundamental movement, but the thing is it's not natural to have a board, pressing into your back, your scapulas, your shoulder blades in particular. It's not a natural movement pattern for the body. What you'll tend to find is as soon as you put pressure on those, those parts of the body, they'll want to sort of come forward. And it's what we call in physio shoulder protraction. Protraction just means the shoulder's moving forward in that plane of motion, not backwards. Retraction, protraction. So the worst thing you can do in a bench press is when you lie flat on the bench and you curl up and you get too much shoulder protraction, that is the most vulnerable position for your body to be in when pressing, especially when you've got a shitload of weight on the bar, right? So as that weight increases, your tolerance sort of comes very, very minute for injury risk. It goes up through the roof. So yeah, there's a couple of key fundamental things I do now teach people and obviously practice myself to put that shoulder predominantly in the best, safest position to press the most weight you can do comfortably.
Aaron, I'm impressed. You at least injured yourself moving 200 kilos. For me, it was 140. Every time I got to 140, I would injure my shoulder. And it was the exact reason that you stipulate there. I had no idea. I bench pressed incorrectly for 18 years before Andrew Locke actually corrected me, because I just thought it was a case of touch the bar to your chest and push it up. There was no real bracing, stability, awareness of my shoulder or scapular position. So if you were to cue the primary means of stabilizing that shoulder girdle, what would be the cues?
So interestingly enough, we did a seminar, me and Luke, last year on this, and I taught some of these pressing mechanics. So you need to start from the foot working upwards, but limiting it just to the shoulder, Scotty, like you've asked. Some of the cues I would use is very, very similar to like our hip hinge patterns with the gunslingers. You want to engage the lats. A lot of people don't understand that lat activation and control when you're pressing is super, super important, right? So the first thing I would do is get the bar height correctly where it's going to be positioned. That's from like the lower part of the body. From that butt, when we start to get the shoulder blades involved, we want to get the shoulder blades back and down. So another good cue is think about putting your lats in your back pocket. You know, you want to get your big proud chair, shoulder blades back and down. Now this is going to basically create like a bit of a small arch in the spine, let's call it, because now you're actually going to be resting more on your scapulars, i.e. your shoulder blades, on the bench. So you're pushing into it essentially. You're not going to let the bench push you, you're pushing into the bench. The next thing to do would be you want to basically create a lot of tension when you're pulling that bar apart. So let's say, you know, you're going about midway, about shoulder width apart, you're going to roll it off. You're going to create a shelf for basically those scapulars to sit on. And the best way to do that is with your lat engagement, and then by putting tension through that bar, like trying to rip it apart, is going to create a really strong engagement through the rhomboids, which is the mid-back muscle, stabilization of the scapula, and build a good shell for you to press on. Now, what I would do from there is the cue I would say to someone to say, how does that feel? And they go, man, that feels really good. I feel really stable. My shoulder feels very, very comfortable. Cool. When you don't feel that, or you flatten out, that is your cue to rack that bar. It means you're either fatigued or the weight is too heavy. Either one of those two situations are going to put you in a very vulnerable position to tear your shoulder, or worse, a pec or something. So that's the sort of cueing I use with an individual like that. I'd say, cool, this is what it's supposed to feel like. If it doesn't feel like this, bail, lock it out, start your engagement all over again. When I do it, I basically, I teach you a lot of it on a Smith machine because it's far easier to get someone's, you know, because the bar's not moving, they can initiate them themselves. So you're sliding under the bar, you're sliding your torso up the seat so the bar sits in the right position across your belly button. You're sliding back down, building tension through the quads to get some good leg drive. Then you do the setup I just described with respect to your shoulder blades. Then you get like a small little arch in the spine. So it's not like a full powerlifting arch, but you will get a bit of extra lordosis in the spine. That is your best, strongest position to press, like sort of, you know, that's our best weapon against sort of injury in that perspective. And then, like I said, if you feel like you're flattening out or you get that shoulder sort of coming forward, all right, now we rack it before something bad happens.
There are exercises where you are meant to have a perfectly vertical bar path, and then others where obviously the bar moves in an arc and things like that. I was always under the impression that you shouldn't bench press on a Smith machine. I'm probably completely wrong, because the traditional movement has a little bit of a arc to it, like you know, touch it lower on your chest and then, you know, press it up to somewhere closer to the upper chest collarbone region. Is that a fallacy? Or is that a strength-based bench press as opposed to a hypertrophy-based bench press? Tell me where I've gone wrong with this.
I think you got some good points there, mate. So the way I would look at that is I think bench press is an excellent bodybuilding tool. It doesn't translate so much into powerlifting because, you know, it's an unnatural movement. We've got a racket behind it. Why I say it's an excellent bench, like particularly for hypertrophy, is the fact is you can get very, very stable and you can unrack it. The problem is when you find when we're doing conventional bench press and you've got a spotter or you don't have a spotter, you're going to have to sort of move that bar back, you know, 3, 4, 5 inches before you get into the correct position. That is also where your shoulder's in a really, really poor spot biomechanically where stuff can go wrong. The Smith machine sort of nullifies that. Does it change your bar path and travel? It will a little bit, depending on the angle of the machine itself. Will that, you know, naturally create less hypertrophy or not? I don't believe so, because it's going to come down to load. Why I like it is it can put people in a very, very strong position to press. Now that is the same movement pattern I would do for a normal bench press. The only difference is now you've got to move that bar back about 3 or 4 inches before it's in that correct position before you press, right? So you can use the same setup, but yeah, I don't think I've done conventional bench press with probably 10, 12 years. It's been strictly Smith machine. A, because I press a fair bit of weight, and B, I train by myself. And if I was to do like a normal bench press, I would want someone, probably like one of you two lads, to spot me, because I wouldn't trust the normal person that they're going to hold that sort of weight if I need to bail. So then you got to weigh up, you know, pros and cons against potential risk and injury versus optimal sort of efficiency of movement, right? So like we said before, the best form of progression is like injury-free lifting. And if I can stay injury-free and still move a decent amount of weight, I think I'd probably prefer that than trying to mimic it on a bar where I'm not too sure of myself or the spotter where it can just go pear-shaped.
You don't want me spotting you, Aaron. I actually spotted a bloke in the gym the other day, and he was bench pressing 175 kilos. I've spotted this guy before, and he did it effortlessly, and I literally was not on top of it. I, at the last minute, saw the bar shift ever so slightly to the right, jumped in too late. He got that arm buckled and it got crushed. the weights, this is in a busy Doherty's gym. All the weights slid off that right side of the bar, and the bar came back at the other end. I was just like panicking. And this is all on film. I made him swear that he would delete it for both our ego's sake. So if you're going to get a spot, mate, I'm traumatized by this incident and so embarrassed that it actually took place, because he sought me out as the bloke who looked like he could handle it, and I completely effed it up. So please, no one ask me for a spot on the bench press again.
We need that footage, Scotty. We need that footage, mate. We've got to put it up. We've got to put it up. Come on.
It has to be deleted. No, that footage will never ever surface. It was the worst spot ever. I was ashamed of myself. So anyway, back to you, Luke. You take it from here.
So what about hand positioning, Beast? Close grip, wider grip, and then depending on the hand positioning, where do your elbows track? Do they come out to the side? Do they come down to your body? There's a lot of confusion about the tracking of the elbow, but I guess it all starts with the placement of your hands.
Spot on, mate. Good question and good points you raised there. So hand placement, it depends what you're trying to do. I'm a big fan, like you go for like a very, very wide sort of position for your hands. It's going to get less elbow sort of, essentially less recruitment through the triceps, because they're not going to move through a bigger range of motion. It's going to potentially be more pec. Can be a little bit more stressful on the shoulder. So you'll find the wider that you go, the harder the setup will potentially be to sort of keep those scapulars on that shelf, because natural biomechanics is going to just try and drag you out a little bit too far, right? So then it comes down to what's comfortable for you. That's kind of what I would tell people. Grab the bar and show me what feels comfortable. Generally, it's going to be around about shoulder width. That's going to be a good all-rounder. If you want to go a little bit wider for whatever particular reason, if you want to hit, maybe the outside pec a little bit more, that's a bit subjective too, about bench press variations in which, hit the muscle a bit more. But I think in general, a good shoulder width position is probably my preferred sort of posi. The other thing that would change is if I was doing more of a close grip, if it's going to be more of a tricep sort of movement pattern. You might get a little bit of range, but you're going to get more range with the tricep, so it becomes more of a tricep dominant sort of press than it would be chest. But yeah, I would just play with essentially what you're trying to target and what you're going to hit and what feels good. Most people are pretty good at saying that just feels like a terrible movement pattern for me, or that feels like a very poor grip position for me. There's a reason for that. And a lot of it to do is either they're going to be their fundamental like anatomy, or their setup, or their cueing. So you need to just drill through that and work out, is it one of those things? And if it's an anatomical sort of thing, sometimes those machines say don't suit everyone's anatomy. Like, not saying any brands or anything like that, but I find it hard now to get into a lot of machines just because of how wide I am at the moment. And if they're a bit too narrow, it puts my shoulder in a really, really poor position. And I get down there into that position here, and I can feel straight away that I'm not in a good, safe position to press. So I just won't do it, right? I'll go and find something that suits my body a bit better. And I sort of use that same translation when you're getting like hand positions on the bar. Just because someone on YouTube did it doesn't mean it's going to suit you explicitly. You need to be smart about your actions, yeah?
And a bit of a meathead question here, but suicide grip or thumb over when you're pressing? I've done both, and I've got to say, the suicide grip, as dangerous as it is, and you do increase the risk by a significant margin, for some reason, I've just felt very strong with it. I'm the same with my back movements, but in particular with pressing, it's very dangerous. It's a meathead sort of grip, isn't it? But are there any benefits, or is it all just in my head?
I haven't seen a lot of this. The hard thing is, right, science can sort of take, now I'm taking two standpoints, like anecdotally, but also like from a science perspective as well. A lot of times science and anecdotal stuff marry up like later on down the track. We haven't seen that a great deal with sort of like the bench press sort of stuff. You see different articles all the time, inclines better, which angle inclines better to hit which part of the chest, which grip position is better. And it changes like the days of the week, right? There'll be a new study next week that someone's brought out that contradicts what came out the week before. I think It's a good question as far as like a meathead sort of thing. I think if it's comfortable and you like it, you can do it. Is it a dangerous sort of movement pattern? Yeah, like it, the risk factor goes up. There's not a lot of tolerance if that slips. You're in a bit of grief. But again, I do it a lot on my pulling and rowing movements, no doubt about that, because the bar's going away from me. It's not gonna fall on me if I kind of mess that sort of stuff up. The only thing that really does with a suicide sort of grip, potentially, is I'm just trying to think from a bench pressing perspective. Why we do it in the rowing and stuff movement is to get less forearm and bicep activation. So that's the suicide grip is perfect in that instance when we're sort of pulling, we're disengaging those muscles. We want to hit the back and, there's other muscles predominantly more so before we burn the biceps out. The only reason I could potentially think someone might get a bit of an advantage with a suicide grip like that would be it might open the palm up a bit more. So you might feel like you're getting a bit better purchase when you're pushing up as opposed to rolling under.
Might have been it. Poor flexibility.
Yeah, more flexibility, and you've got like a bigger pad, let's call it, to maybe drive up, and the thumb's not in the way. That's the only thing I can think of that potentially could link from a biomechanical sense.
Aaron, I don't know if you ever trained with Luke back when he was at his biggest and best, but Luke was potentially the most immobile human being I've ever met in my life. to the point where one time he suggested we actually do a bench press challenge where you have just one plate either side of the bar and you just hold it like an inch above your chest.
Right.
Now, unbeknownst to me, that's as far as Luke could go with only one plate aside on the barbell. He needed 2 plates, 3 plates to actually get the bar to touch his chest.
Yeah.
So do you recommend any sort of mobility work or something like that for someone as immobile as Luke?
Oh, 100%. It must be the Irish Maltese genes, mate, because I suffer from the same fate. So, must be the upper thoracic sort of, instability, whatever's going on. So I would do a lot of upper thoracic. And when I say upper thoracic, say middle of your back to your, in between your shoulder blades sort of stuff, mobility work. There's a couple of really nice warm-ups you can get where, you can use the actual bench press machine, the bar behind your back, sort of between the shoulder blades, and articulate and stretch the spine, and both, in a rotation sort of way, left and right, and, further back. And then lat activation, believe it or not, is going to go a good way to sort of give you some extra mobility. Because you can better engage the lats, it's going to pull you, essentially in a better biomechanical position, which theoretically is going to give you your best chance to sort of get increased mobility as well. So thoracic rotation and stretching and proper lat engagement, I would say, would do a good way to help some of the mobility problems.
Beast, one question I've been waiting 25 years to ask, mate, I'm going to ask you today. Why was I stronger in incline press than flat press? I could never match I could never match my incline presses. They were the biggest lifts I did, about 15, 20% stronger than my flat. How is that possible, mate? I still don't know.
Yeah, I'm gonna say this is the genes thing again, because I suffer from the same fate. I don't know why. And this is what I was saying to you before with the evidence and what it suggests about being strong in certain movement patterns. I think just biomechanically certain things suit people a bit better. Or you like that movement a bit better, so you train it a bit harder, you got a bit more mind-muscle connection. So I think it's more of a perfect storm of a few different things, not just one categorically because of it's this because of X. I think it's probably a contributing factor for a lot of things. And I say that because when I've gone back and looked at it and I look at my logbook and I go, well, I can press on this, but there's nowhere near I can press on this, and what's going on? And I think it's because incline 2, personally, I like the movement pattern. It feels good. I was always told, everyone's going to be stronger in flat press than you will in incline. So I took that as a bit of a challenge. Thought, well, I'm going to show you how much I can incline press, right? So for a long time in my career, man, I was just incline pressing. I think I did flat pressing for a good 4 years, right? Just to get those numbers up. And they went up. Flat bench was still terrible. And it's still not much better. So I can actually bench a lot better decline and incline than I can flat. But I can't really come to the conclusion other than a couple of key factors of I put more time and effort into incline. I thought it was harder, so I got better engagement. And I just practiced that movement pattern over and over again to the point where it just becomes second nature.
There you go. Well, mate, you mentioned the decline. So one more meathead question. Can we target the lower pecs by doing decline press?
Well, man, we're getting controversial now. I'll probably get a whole bunch of people send me some messages saying, There's been a lot of like, there's always these different studies with EMG analysis, right? When they put muscles through their motions, which elicits higher EMG analysis. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's going to lead to increased hypertrophy all the time. So can you target that lower pec? Predominantly a little bit more, maybe, because of the articulation of the shoulders and where you're pressing. I'm a bit of a hedge all bets sort of person when it comes to programming for stuff like that. Because we can't guarantee, I don't think it's as clear cut as like we talked about in a previous episode with regards to hamstrings and like the RDL. To me, that's night and day. Like you can clearly explain as to why that is such a good movement. Scotty gave a real good example between the two differentiations we had. That's super clear. The difference is when you've got your muscle origins and insertions on your pec, you've got your sternal head and you've got your clavicular head, right? So the lower pec is still sternal, and then it starts to sweep up as we go to the upper portion of the shoulder. I would say when I said hedging my bets is I would program so I would do all three variations just in case. So I would put in flat, I would put in incline, and I would put in decline. Can I guarantee which one's going to work one proportionally better than the other? Probably not. But if I do all three in a simulated fashion, well, we're definitely not going to miss out, as long as you're training each one with the correct intensity, volume, and frequency.
Would you suggest that the decline is riskier? Like if we're trying to drive the scaps back and down and you're in a decline position, it's trying to push the scaps up. I know it feels a lot sketchier on my shoulders.
Oh, yeah.
Is it a higher risk movement, do you think?
I would say it's a higher risk movement than it would be, say, your normal flat or incline. To be brutally honest, if I was looking at both those things from my setup perspective, flat would be the safest, incline would be second, decline would be third. Only because exactly like you alluded to, Scotty, we're trying to get the scapulars down and back where it's trying to bring them up and forward. So we're kind of trying to counteract that good posture that we put it in. But in saying that, even my setup with that, you're obviously taking the legs out of it now because you're in a bar, a bench like this, right? So you can't get any leg drive as per se. But I still do the very, very similar movement pattern. This is where the Smith machine comes into its own on a movement like this, is because I can set that bar height, I can get the bench just in the right angle, and basically when I unrack it, I do so as such where I'm in control, and as soon as those scapulars start to like flatten out a bit, I rack it. But yeah, you would struggle more so on a conventional barbell, if that makes sense. That's where I think the Smith machine really comes into its own for control and that sort of stuff.
And B, since we've mentioned incline, flat, and decline, let's just go one step further. Dips, are they triceps? Is it a chest exercise, or can you sort of change the variation of the dips to slightly target either muscle group?
Yeah, there's been a lot of research. There's been anecdotal experience. You guys tell me yourself. I think more of a vertical sort of dip, straight up and down, is definitely going to be more tricep orientated. I think if you can come with a bit of a lean forward a bit more and your emphasis sort of like pushing towards, you get a bit more of a chest pump out of that one. Again, I think it's both. If you think about the actual natural movement pattern, the more forward you lean, right, the more forward it kind of looks more like a bit of a bench press. So it's feasible to say that, if we lean a bit more forward, you're probably going to get a bit more pec activation than you would be if you went dead smack bang straight up and down, which is more like a pure tricep sort of movement. So yeah, dips are a great one. I like them as a good finisher, particularly if you're doing like a push day and you're going to couple it with like, any of your tricep sort of stuff as well. It's good bang for buck. It wouldn't be my primary movement for like chest development, but it's definitely an important one to weave in there for both chest and tricep, I reckon.
Beast, while we've got you, because we've done a fair bit there on the pressing, what do you think about sort of accessories in the gym to minimise injury risk, whether it be weightlifting shoes, belts, wraps? What's your take on that?
Oh man, I reckon they have their place. It's like everything, the right exercise at the right time for the right person. That's no different to sort of lifting a pro. Although I do find it pretty funny when I bowl into a gym, and I seen one, would have been 2 weeks ago, man, and this bloke had a weight belt on, he had gloves on, he had knee straps on. He was doing everything, like he had everything going on. And then he was doing a hip thruster. And I'm like, what's going on here? Like, I think he's just gone online, he's purchased the entire kit, and he wanted to get maximum value by bowling up to the gym, just, putting it everywhere. The belt wasn't even tight, like it was hung like that, right? Like it was just hanging off his hip like a gunslinger. And I was like, what is this bloke doing, man? Like, so again, right thing for the right person, at the right time. Probably two key ones there that you touched on, Scotty, would be shoes and the belts. I think they're two big ones that people get wrong or get right or just don't do at all. So yeah, they're two I'd probably warrant. I use pretty considerately in both contexts.
What are your do's and don'ts of the shoes themselves? Like, is that a specific leg day thing, or how do you do it?
Definitely a leg day thing. I mean, a lot of gyms, barefoot training is good because it lets the foot just do its natural ability to where it's going to go. A lot of gyms, obviously, these days are all about, safety, HR, whatever that might be, so you can't train barefooted into most gyms. What you want to try and get is a shoe that doesn't crush your feet. You want like a nice wide, what they call like a toe box. It's kind of like where your midfoot sort of sits. Normal running shoes and stuff are not going to do the job because they're going to like splay and crush the toes, right? Dr. Aaron Horsage from Squat University has got some really good stuff on this as well. They've actually developed a shoe that it's not the most sexiest of shoes. It looks like one of those Norwegian clogs, man, but I think it's, from an anatomical perspective for lifting, it's going to be a very good shoe because it's got a nice wide toe box. It lets the toes sort of splay. It lets you get what they call like a good tripod foot, so you can actually put some pressure through the midfoot, the toes, and obviously the heel. If you try and do that with like runners and stuff like that, it is super hard. So your load distribution is uneven. It feels whack. It just doesn't feel natural. So in my gym, I would do it barefoot because it's my gym and no one can tell me to get out. But in a normal gym, I would make sure that I've got an extra wide pair of shoes, a good pair of lifting shoes that have got a bit wider toe box will go, a long way to sort of solving those sorts of things. And I would even go to the point, depending on what you're doing, if it feels comfortable, that one size up, just to give yourself plenty of room within that shoe. You just don't want to crush your feet, essentially.
Luke, do you think back to all those days in the squat rack with your Nike Airs and your Asics gel soles, and like I do?
Still wear them to this day. I actually did a year of training in Thailand just in sandals because I wanted to prove a point. I had to throw them out when the sandals started growing some mushrooms, but it was a good year of training in the tropical environment. Beast, you mentioned a weights belt, so is it just a fashion accessory? You just put it on and you can walk around the gym and then you're protected, or is there a bit more to it?
Well, I think old mate I saw last week, I think that's his perception. I think he became armed with the belt, no one was touching him. But I think, a lot of people wear it as an accessory. I'll see guys predominantly, girls not so much, but, they'll be doing tricep pushdowns with a belt on, biceps, some other whack exercises. So the belt has its place. I think a lot of people misunderstand what the belt is for. And then other people have got this idea, like I get in the clinic actually with like lower back patients and they say, can I just put a brace on that belt up there? Can I just whack it on? I'm like, no. We want to make you strong in those. The belt is acting as like muscles in that situation with a low back pain sort of person. But this is no different, right? So we want good spinal stability. That's where the belt sort of comes into its own. So when we've talked about in the past about kinesthesia and feel, what you've got to imagine is what that belt is actually trying to do. When we put it on, does it give you just normal natural stability because it's a bit stiff? Yeah, but the predominant thing it works upon is it's trying to crush, throughout, it's trying to crush your midsection. What you're trying to do is fill your lungs up and fill your belly up full of air to meet that pressure. So it's a good feedback tool, right? So I use it specifically for that. So when people start breathing through their diaphragm as opposed to their chest, you can fill your belly full of air to meet the sort of compression that the belt is providing. What that's going to guarantee you is a much stronger and stiffer spine to start lifting with, right? That's what the belt should be doing. But people wear it as a fashion accessory just because they think if I put a belt on, I can go and squat, Ronnie Coleman style. Well, it's not going to happen, right? But if you use it effectively, it can be a very powerful tool. It's just you see it more often than not. That's probably the one thing I see in the gym that's used ineffectively more often than not.
I remember, Beast, when I had Muscle Mills Direct, I was sponsoring an athlete and called him into the office for a meeting, and he was wearing a weights belt into the meeting. He thought it was going to ensure his success of being a sponsored athlete. I think that ended the deal. Didn't even go ahead.
Oh, man. It would have done it for me too. Not have walked out.
The weight belt does increase the taper. So, and touching on something before, I think in my full meathead days, my core was actually the limiting factor in a tricep pushdown. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, Aaron, as a man with incredible pressing strength, but I would neglect my abdominals to the point where they would start to seize up and cramp on a tricep pushdown. So maybe the weight belt would have been an adequate accessory at that point in time. We're going to have to wrap this one up soon, Beast. So have you got any other tips or things to look out for if we're talking about general injury prevention within the gym?
Just generally injury prevention. I would just use common sense. I see too much people these days, they see the latest thing trend on YouTube or Insta and stuff like that and think, yeah, that's a good idea. I might give that a crack. Think about it rationally. Think about what you're trying to achieve in the gym. Is it trying to achieve another 10 followers on Instagram, or is it trying to put some good muscle on and be functionally fit and healthy? And the other thing I do is just always cost benefit, risk versus reward. You know, it might be a really cool thing to do a certain movement pattern a certain way because you saw Joe Bloggs do it on the internet. What's it really going to give you? Do you need to do it? I think we were talking about these stuff and the topics we're going to talk about. I seen a pretty wild one where a lady was in a Smith machine and she was standing on the dumbbells and she had a PT with her. That was the craziest thing. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, what benefit would that provide, right? Like, think about it. And I actually went over to the bloke and I said to him, man, what are you going to do? Oh, what's that do? Oh, unstable surface. I go, okay, cool. So you're going to put 60 kilos on her back in an unstable surface, 6 inches off the ground. Right. What's that going to do? Couldn't answer me. He looked at me square in the face and I just went, good luck, guys. I think you'll be a patient in about 2 weeks, you know? So you just got to use common sense. Like if someone said that to you, I would always ask the question, why? What actual benefit is that going to give me over the individual like Scotty or Luke doing normal squats? Why would standing on a dumbbells in a Smith machine be even considered be optimal? And if it sounds ridiculous, it probably is, you know? So, and you know, you just got to see those things on YouTube and Insta where things go pear-shaped in a gym. Man, that's where they stem from, is stuff like that. Don't get creative. Just
or very bad spotters during bench press, Aaron.
Yeah, I heard that actually. I can't wait to find that. It's been floating around online.
All right.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much for your time once again, Aaron. There's probably many more topics we might call on you for in the future. For everyone that enjoyed the episode, please remember to like and subscribe and leave a comment below. And we would like to thank you for your listenership and viewership, and we will be back in the near future.
Thanks, boys.
There's no cure for this one!